Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode where we get to know our ambassadors. And today I'm meeting with Sekhar from India. Sekhar, great to have you on this show and great to get to know you better.
Thank you, Saurabh. It's nice. It's been a while we met, so I'm really excited to talk to you, and let's get into it. Thank you.
So, Sekhar, similar to what I used to be, you are a certified Scrum trainer with the Scrum Alliance, if I recall this correctly. Now, before we dive into what you do today, I'd like to really understand, and I asked the same question to all of our other ambassadors as well. Where did your personal agile journey start? Walk me through that a bit.
Well, it's been it's since 2008. I was the first CSM. There were only a few CSMs in this part of the world where I'm in. So since then, 2 years later, I was a CSPO practicing Scrum Mastering, and after that, product owner. In 2014, it was a CEC. It was at that time it was Certified Scrum Coach. Now it has been renamed as Certified Enterprise Coach. So, and then I was part of Scrum Alliance Review Committee, CEC Review Committee, where I was for almost 10 years. I came out of the review committee sometime in June 2024. So it's been 10 years. I've been reviewing so many CEC applicants over a period of time. Not only learned from my own professional coaching journey, but I also learned from many applications that I reviewed and talked to. So it was a very enriching experience for me personally and also professionally, because I interacted with so many coaches during the coaching retreats of Scrum Alliance and other coaching retreats as well. And I'm also in the PCC, ICF PCC by myself. So after 2016, when I took the training journey, it's been like, as per the official numbers of Scrum Alliance, it's been close to 19,000 people I trained so far. That is on CSM, CSP, and advanced classes, apart from what I do in coaching and consulting. So that is pretty much briefly about me. And apart from that, I'm a vivid speaker. I speak at various local and international conferences. For example, recently in August, I was a keynote speaker for a regional Scrum gathering in Singapore. So on and off, I keep doing a lot of webinars, sharing the knowledge, as well as I do a lot of talks and then mentoring upcoming coaches and trainers. So this is something a part of my journey so far.
Now, this is super interesting, and as you mentioned, it's been a very rich journey. Now, let's go to the very beginning. 2008, you mentioned you became one of the first, if not the first CSM in India. Out of curiosity, with whom did you take the training back then?
So I took the training from Pete Deemer.
Deemer, yeah. He was
Yeah,
very active, I think, in that
yeah, he
region as
was
well.
very active at that time, and it was really fabulous. So the kind of impact he created on me was really awesome. So if by looking at him, I was like, if there is someone whom I want to become, it would be like him. So that was my inspiration. So and you don't believe, I did co-training with him later on after like 6 7 years. I did co-training with him, and very valuable feedback, because of which I learned how to engage sessions, how to engage participants, how can I improve my energy levels. So there was a lot of learning that I went through, and that was my and in fact he was one of my biggest inspiration.
I had a very similar experience. So I took my first training, which was a product owner course with Gabriel Benefield, and I was so amazed by Gabby. And in that training, I asked her, "Would you mentor me to become like you?" And she was so great. She said, "Yes, of course. I see potential in you. Let's do that." A few months later, we were co-training for the very first time, and the rest is history. But I really understand the feeling that you must have had in that training with Pete Deemer, sitting there looking at that person in admiration and saying, I want to be that person. I want to be that person in a
Yeah.
year, in two, in five, whatever, right? Whatever it takes, I'm going to do the work to get there.
Yeah, we are impacting lives. We are changing lives. We are changing the way how people think. Because I mean, honestly, there have been so much of chaos in this world, and we are changing them. We are helping them to get better. And what can be more fulfilling than that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
So
fully
yeah.
agree. Fully agree. So you go through that training with Pete. You're not only in awe of that person, right? I want to be like that. But I assume that you also find the topic that he's sharing with you quite interesting. Now, give me a bit more about the context that you were in back then. Were you an employee at an organization, or were you already in your own company and supporting other organizations to do work in a different way? Give me a bit about that context, and then how you also started to apply the things that you learned in Pete's training.
Okay. So back then, at that point of time, not many CSMs were in the market. So I got my job very easily in one of the company as a Scrum Master. So, there were only a handful CSMs in our country. And I got a very good position as a Scrum Master. And believe me, Scrum Mastering is like fighting. I mean, at that point of Scrum Mastering was like fighting battles every day. You are working against highly influenced people in the organizations who are holding very top positions, and now you are bringing all these Scrum practices into those organizations where it is totally opposite to their mindset. It is very contrarian, and then that was the biggest learnings for me. In fact, I always jokingly say to everyone, if you are a good Scrum Master, you probably had a lot of battle scars. So it's battling day in and day out. So the biggest thing in Scrum is the discipline. People don't like all this time boxing and all this team-based culture. There was a lot of individual heroism in the organizations. So like, okay, so the more I put down people and become an individual hero, so the more I survive in this organization. So that was a kind of thought process going through many people. Everyone claimed that they were heroes in the organization. Everyone say that, hey, you know what, you joined like a few weeks back. Why the hell we even have to follow what you say? Why the hell we need to transform this culture? So we have been working like this for several years. So we don't see a motivation to change. This was the kind of ecosystem that I survived for many years. That again, every day, for the first few weeks, I was losing every day. It was totally losing and losing for the first few weeks. But I had this strong determination of talking to people, talking to network. Hey, are there any people out there who are facing the same thing that I was going through? So we used to get into a small community, Scrum Master community in our city, and I used to get to other cities also and see, hey, what is that you are going through? Why is that you are going through? So we used to discuss a lot, and mostly the problems were pretty similar. So because of which I learned a lot from others' experiences also. For example, like I used to talk to the Scrum Masters on how do you get rid of this individual heroism? Everyone thinks that they were real heroes and they wanted to get everything done at the cost of others. So they wanted to put others down and say that they were the heroes. They lifted the project with one hand overnight. These were the taller claims that people used to do in my teams back then. So one thing that I learned over a period of time is even now I follow it. Support people during their painful time. So once I started supporting people during their painful time, everyone don't have good days all the time. So once I start supporting people during their painful time, I used to get a lot of trust from them. So once I started trusting once I get their trust, more or less, it is not very difficult to get into an agreement. Hey, this is what we wanted to do, and this is what we have a plan. Like we work as one single team and we wanted to get better. More or less, I used to get the buy in. But the more and more I support people during their painful time, the more I used to win their trust.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a ton of interesting things from my perspective, but I want to pick one of them first. You mentioned you were losing for weeks. When you say losing, what does that mean to you?
Oh, okay. So the first thing, like, why should I even do all this?
Yeah. Why
Why?
bother?
Yeah, I used to cry myself, like, why should I even do all this? Why should I even attempt to change something here? And why is that I'm going against these people who are very powerful? And the biggest thing that I used to think about is what is it in for me transforming these people or changing these people or changing the process, changing the system? So I'm not going to get a promotion if I do all this. I may not even get a pay raise if I do all this. I don't become very popular in the organization if I fight these people. So this is what I was going through at that point of time. But over a period of time, the more I started preaching all this, I used to become super popular because I was the only one who have this who had this contrarian thinking. So they used to listen to me one day, 1 week, 1 month, and then over a period of time, hey, you know what? This guy was saying something which we never thought about. For example, I used to preach this like 100% utilization is never equivalent to 100% value produced by an individual or a team.
Yes.
That's what I used to do. So they used to maximize the hours. They used to maximize the utilization. And then I had some examples where the manager was noting down at what time they enter into the office, at what time they left the office. And then, they used to calculate like, okay, this person logged 8 hours or 8.5 hours today. So that was the time where I used to say that, hey, you know what? Did you calculate the value proposition given by this individual or a team? And then, like, what crazy? We have been doing these metrics for several years. And then, so with all this contrarian thinking, you know what? At some point of time, after multiple months and years, I used to become super popular. Hey, hey, you made an interesting point. Tell us, how do we measure value instead of utilization? Over so many years, we have been measuring utilization of individuals. We want everyone to be 100% utilized. Yeah. So that was the thinking. It was all like you plant the seed. See, I strongly believe in this bamboo tree concept. What is this bamboo tree concept is you plant the seed. First year, nothing will happen. You don't see a sapling also. Next year, nothing will happen. Third year, nothing will happen. And fourth year, the tree grows 90 meters. So the idea was like this seed was probably, it is stretching under the ground. It is making a lot of foundation. And then, at some point of time, it will grow like 90 meters. Where you will be shocked and surprised. Okay, I've been so patient all these years, nothing happened, but suddenly it has given me this growth. So even the change in the organization that you are trying to do, I call it as more of catalyzing. How do you catalyze this change? Like, how do you plant those small saplings and these saplings plant other saplings slowly? And then at some point of time, this is like a massive change that we see over a period of time. That is what I experienced in my coaching journey.
Yeah. Now, I think a few things to add there. Once you plant those seeds, it's not just about planting the seed.
Yeah, you have to
It's
nurture it.
also consistent, like watering it, etc. Right? And that's what you mentioned by
Yeah,
being so determined, being so
yeah,
consistent. Although you were not seeing the results yet,
yeah,
you didn't give up.
yeah,
I refer to this as a shaper's mindset as to a victim mindset where people are like, oh, I can't change anything anyway. I already mentioned X, Y, Z to them several times, but they're just not hearing me, right? All of the time finding excuses, but you are like, no, 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 I'm determined. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be consistent. And then suddenly you see those results. And I think you also mentioned another term earlier when you were describing your role as a Scrum Master, and what people struggled with or disliked was the discipline. And that's exactly, it's like, so the consistency, the discipline, that's what makes a huge difference. When I see people saying, oh, we don't like these time boxes, it's usually not because the time box is too long. It's because they don't have the discipline to stick to that time box, right? And get to their decisions within that time box. And then as a unit, move forward. Now, Sekhar, another thing that I wanted to ask you is, what was your job before you became a Scrum Master? So with what kind of a background, with what kind of a mindset did you get into this role in the first place?
So I was a developer doing some coding. I was doing like C coding and some web development. So I was a developer for pretty like 7 to 8 years. I was a developer doing a lot of coding, and then I had some team lead and manager experience as well for 1 or 2 years. And after that, like feel like I was feeling very suffocated. There were like 4 or 5 developers who were doing the real coding. And, the fun part was like at least 8, 9 managers who used to ask status every 10 minutes. Wow. That was like, okay, they don't allow me to focus on my work. Like, okay, the 10 minutes, somebody comes and asks me, hey, what happened? Okay. So yes, I told that I'm fixing it. And then again, 10 minutes later, I said that somebody else will come and say that, okay, you did not fix it yet. So how much time will you take? Okay, come on, I'm focusing on something.
Yeah.
There was an ecosystem where people don't allow me to focus. There was an ecosystem where no respect for individuals who work really hard for the organization. There was an ecosystem where even during the troubled times, there were so many people, in spite of putting all the hard work, there are not even people who say thank you. So that was the kind of organizational ecosystem that I used to work in. So because of which, after I attended this Scrum session, this CSM session, I felt like, okay, this probably can fix everything. So, but only the biggest challenge was I have to deal with a lot of mindsets.
Mhm.
So dealing with all this mindsets was really a difficult job.
So based on being a developer, you had also the credibility with the developers. Now, you mentioned a lot of the things that you did, like planting those seeds, watering them, being consistent, losing a lot of battles, but then ultimately starting to win. Now, what was for you winning in that case? If we use that metaphor, right? What changed and how did you perceive that change within that first organization where you worked as a Scrum Master?
Okay. So the change was very, very, what I call it as accomplishing for me. I thought I made one of the biggest accomplishment. It was such a joyful moment for me where my team was doing retrospectives and becoming better over a period of time. So let's say, for example, last sprint, they messed up with some testing, and this sprint, they were like, fixing the testing, so make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes again. It was a journey of continuous improvement. So it was honestly, that was the day when I say, like, if I can do it for one team, I can do it for 10 teams. If I can do for 10 teams, I can do it for the whole organization. The only challenge was, how do I catalyze this change where I want all the teams in that organization learn from this team. And I used to make all these models, all this, on day one, this is where we were, and this is where we have been going. So it was very satisfying. And I wanted to give this to everyone. Hey, you know what? This is what we tried. This is what was working. This was not working. And, at some point of time, I used to feel very happy that people used to call me and ask me, hey, you know what? You are that Scrum guy where, you implemented something in this team and we tried doing this and it didn't work for us. Would you like to help us as well? So when you are that go-to person in the organization, it was a different experience altogether.
Yeah.
So it started really slow, but at some point of time, it triggered a chain reaction.
You built momentum. Yeah, absolutely. Now, walk me through what happened then. So you work with that team. You probably increase the number of teams that you support within that organization. Now, this is 2008 where this whole thing started. Take me like fast track from 2008 to today, the past 16 years, 17 years.
Yeah. So one setback that again I got into was, like, when the top leaders changed, everything reset it back to square one. Previously there were leaders who used to support me in this journey, but an year or two later, they just moved on to a different role or something like that. Again, like, you have all these waterfall leaders who come into the organization and they reset back to the same old processes. So that was a big learning for me, that hey, if you want really great results and the journey of continuous improvement to sustain, you need to hire the same set of leaders in the organization. That was something that I learned. And after that, somewhere in 2012, I became a product owner, and then I have to deal with all these irritating stakeholders. So stakeholder management was one of my pain. You have someone calling me and saying that I want this feature one day. Next day, the same guy calls me and say that I don't want this. I want something else. Yeah. So it's like, I thought Scrum Master battles were really
Tough.
the Master battles were really better than product owner battles. You have all these stakeholders who are yelling, yeah, I asked you to give me this and you never got me this, and then you got me something else. And it was like everyday chaos being a product owner. And then telling these product owners that, telling these stakeholders that, hey, you know what, we cannot get your stuff done this month or this week was one of the biggest challenge I faced as a product owner. That was for a few years. And after that, I moved into a coaching role where down the line, like it was like 2013, I moved into a coaching role where supporting lot of coaching initiatives across enterprise coaching, team coaching. I was with one of the senior leader in an organization. He was a business unit head, and he said like, okay, your thoughts are very different than what others think in this organization. Why don't you help us in transforming? So the transformation initially started really well. There was a big euphoria at the beginning, but the momentum, came down. So one thing that I see all the upcoming coaches even now is, yes, once you attend the training, you feel very energetic, very excited because the trainer might have energized you. But once you get into this, it is so difficult to sustain the momentum. So people again have their own thoughts on, okay, everyone is not doing like this. It is so difficult for me to explain this to the stakeholders. No, 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 we don't. We plan like 2 years ahead in the journey. You keep hearing all this, and not everyone are really good at articulating what is the problems with this kind of thinking. So sustaining was one of the biggest challenges that even I faced. Then I used to do all these maturity assessments and all. So it was a lot of learning. And after which I applied for CEC with that knowledge, and I got rejected once. So first time I was rejected as a CEC, and the second time again I went through a lot of mentoring, reviewing, and all that. And then second time I was approved. So and after that it was like then I determined like, okay, I don't want to change or transform the whole world. Only I want to work with people who have serious intentions to change. Pushing change on people is going
It's
to
impossible.
toll on oneself. I used to take a lot of toll on myself because, hey, you know what, whatever you're working is not making sense. If you try like this, it could probably. So when you start telling people all this, they say like, whatever you said is good, but I'm not going to follow it because my boss will not allow me to do this. They'll give you a reason why they don't want to change. So since then, I was very determined that, hey, I'm not here to change the entire world, but at the same time, I'm going to help someone. Even out of 100 organizations that I touch, even if one or two wanted to change, I'm going to help them when there are serious intentions. So they are now I transformed my own thought process like, okay, they are the one who is going to own the change. I'm the one who is helping them in this journey of change. So that was very enlightening for me at that point of time. So that is what I went through for a few years until 2016. And since then, once I got my CST approved, I used to roughly dedicate equal time for 50%. During weekends. I used to do a lot of training, and weekdays I used to do coaching, consulting, mentoring, all this. So it was honestly very enriching journey. Most of my clients from then onwards are those whom I trained before. So that is what, if I train someone today, maybe down the line after 3-4 months, they used to check back and say that, hey, we need help here. So that is what I used to get it. So over a period of time, you have all these so many frameworks, so many substitutes in the market with scaling frameworks and everything coming up in the market. So currently, I'm finding my own new ways of looking into it. Nowadays, everyone knows Scrum, bits and pieces here and there. Of course, there is still a lot of scope for improvement. But nowadays, everyone knows Scrum. Everyone is doing some amount of Scrum part of Scrum. They implement it. But if someone calls me and asks me, hey, you know what? Can you come in and see how well we are doing it? Because we don't see any benefits. Yes, people are doing bunch of practices here and there, but these practices, they don't add up. They don't add up to the outcomes. So if someone is calling me like that and asking for help, I'm happy to help them out. But it is not about going into organizations and see, hey, you have to change. No, I'm not that kind of person any longer. Yeah.
Yeah, you get wiser over time. You get
Yeah.
wiser over time. Now, what I found interesting, Sahar, is you worked as a developer, then you worked as a Scrum Master, then you worked as a product owner. So you basically took over all three roles within a Scrum team for a a certain amount of time. Then you start working based on the experience you had with one team on like supporting the change or catalyzing the change, as you mentioned it, within an organization. And now I believe that that is the primary work that you do in addition to the trainings where you enable people to understand what is this whole way of working about and give them the tools and techniques they need in order to get started. Now, walk me through a bit of the industries that you have supported. I know that you've done a lot of work in software. You mentioned this earlier. You've been a developer yourself. But have you also done the application of these tools, techniques, and frameworks outside of the software space?
Okay. So, a lot of experience in banking where I support banks across Canada, Singapore, India. In fact, I did a lot of work in Canada. If you don't believe, I used to travel heavily pre-COVID. So, one area of my big expertise is still is banking. I know the challenges banks will face, the kind of regulatory challenges they go through. So that is one area. The other one is the insurance companies, where we see the challenges with those insurance companies underwriting. Oh no, my premium changes and all this over a period of time. So that is one area where I have some expertise. And then recently, off late, I've been working with some fintechs where it's fintechs is a very nice space that is emerging over a period of time. And I love that space because you have a lot of these small players entering into the market, and then they need a lot of support in trying to understand the regulations as well as technology. How do they bind them together and offer a lot of value?
Yeah.
So fintech space, some of these startups, they have grown massively over a period of time, at least in the part of the world where I'm working with. So that's like emerging. And I'm also currently doing a doctoral program on fintech space only. I love this space, and I'm doing some research on trying to understand what new offerings they can add and how they can add a lot of value to customers. So of course, I used to work as a developer in telecom and all, but they are back then at that point of time. But if you ask me, it's like the banking,
Insurances and
insurance, and fintech space. And of course, I've been training a lot of these consulting companies, the big four consulting companies. I trained them. You know who are the big four? So big four consulting companies, I trained them at least once. I touched all these big four, and I'm so happy because I learned a lot from them, and they also learned a lot from me as well.
yeah.
This is
So it
what
sounds like
is
you've
like.
been doing a lot of work in the financial services industry, right?
Yeah.
Insurance, banking, and then fintech. Now, I'm also super amazed with the fintech companies. Our company ourselves, we heavily rely on Stripe as a payment provider. It's amazing the product that they've built. I personally use products like Revolut or Wise as
Wow.
like digital banks. It's so easy to work with them, and every time I want to get something done with a traditional bank, I'm like, oh my God, is this painful? Right. And this is where you see the agility, not only in product development, but in business model development and
Correct.
testing and like how quickly they run
Yeah.
experiments and then
Yeah.
they get into new markets. And
Yeah.
I think with the emergence of those fintechs, the traditional players in that space, the banks and the insurances, they just learned for themselves,
Yeah.
hey, if we don't change,
Yeah.
they are going to eat our lunch, right? They're already
Exactly.
eating our breakfast, but
Yeah.
they will also eat our lunch. And I think it's
Exactly.
fascinating
Exactly.
to see that
So,
you're building that expertise or that you have built expertise in that space.
yeah.
And I think across the globe, not only in your primary market, but across the globe, there is need for people with your set of skills, both in terms of the industry, but even more importantly, with the way of working, right?
Yes.
So with that said, Sekhar, we are at the end of our time box. I have just one more question, and I think to some extent you already provided an answer, which is what would be prerequisites of clients to work with you so that you can really help them succeed? And I think one aspect that you mentioned was they have to be willing to change. You cannot, obviously, you cannot force them,
Yeah.
but also you're not an evangelist that tries to convince them. So they need to bring that willingness to change, and then you can
Correct.
support them.
Yeah.
Are there any other prerequisites that are
So,
important from your
as
perspective?
I said, it's their seriousness to change. They wanted to try something. That's the first thing that I always see. And then I would always say, like, agility must be your top priority, not maybe the fifth or 10th priority. So how fast you wanted to pivot and learn from your failures and move on? So if you don't have the willingness to pivot new experiments, then probably you're not going to go anywhere with this new market creation or market expansion or whatever it is. So that is the second thing. So your priority of the agility and how much you are willing to pivot. So that is the second thing. Third, if you are a leader, how do you lead by example? So let's say, for example, most of the time there are so many transformation approaches. It's like top down, bottom up, middle down, top up, and then slicing a thin layer of whatever it is. So I like what Michael Sahota said sometime back. The leaders transform and they inspire others. The leaders transform first and inspire others. So that is something which I strongly believe in. Are you the person who is willing to hold the flag and change first and show everyone that, hey, this is something that we got to do? So these are like maybe 2 or 3 prerequisites that I would put in place if someone wants to really work with me.
Cool. Sekhar, thank you so much. It was a joy talking to you.